morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales, wherever in the world you are today. Today is episode 16 of yWeb3, Navigating Frontier Tech. So we're going to go through a whole bunch of really interesting topics related to Web3, AI, global regulatory standards, and really kind of see a lot of the challenging and changing of crypto assets and how platforms are adapting to these new territories and policies. We're going to discover some really intriguing developments, like countries offering citizenship tied to specific financial assets, and the launch of a Euro peg stablecoin, Euro E. We actually spent quite a bit of time with this. Our journey will also go into blockchain logistics, innovative data sharing devices, biometric security collaborations, and digital currency integrations with major platforms. I'm joined today by two amazing guests, Dan Guido and Dave Perrill. Today is December 14th, 2023. Bitcoin is sitting at 42,300. The NASDAQ is at 14,700 and change, and the Fed is staying relatively static at 5.25. Dave, let's go ahead with your intro, and we're going to get right into the news here shortly.
Jay, good to be here. Thanks for having me. So, hey, audience, Dave Perrill, four-time tech founder, CEO. I've been in the crypto sector for the last 7 years, built up the largest hosting and what we call tier zero infrastructure company in North America. Back at it, interested in the integration of both energy and computing assets, and excited to be here today.
Fabulous, fabulous. Mr. Guido, thank you for joining us. We understand you're a little under the weather, but super excited to have somebody here, especially with some of the exploits we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Dan Guido. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TrailofBits. We're a software security research and development company that focuses on securing emerging technology, and that includes blockchain security, where we've become kind of the main sort of security vendor that DeFi apps, that people writing smart contracts, that people writing dApps, that people do anything with blockchain end up hiring to help them write secure code.
One of the things I really like, and I just want to call out about TrailofBits, is it's like you have to be really confident in your project and your kind of everything to even want to engage TrailofBits, because you guys make your results public, right off the bat. So it's like it really is a gold standard to state like, no, we hired TrailofBits and what the results were exposed immediately.
Yeah, that could actually be an hour-long talk if we wanted to just zoom into that one topic, because I feel like there are a lot of other security companies out there that do publish some of the work that they do. I think in the security community generally, like not in blockchain, nobody talks about the work they do, right? Everything is under NDA. Nobody wants to air their dirty laundry. And you hear very, very little about how the software that's on your iPhone or the software that's on your Mac or the software that you use on the web was secured. On blockchain, you hear pretty much everything. But TrailofBits has very strong standards for the language we use to describe these things to people. We want it to be objective. We want it to be devoid of any sort of subjective analysis. And we want it to be trustworthy. We want to have integrity when we share those results with people. And I don't see the same standards being applied by some of our other competitors. They treat them as marketing documents. They use them to sort of say, oh, it was so great to work with these people. They gave us all the information that they asked for. It's a wonderful product and it's totally secure now. And it's really corrosive to the public understanding of whether a product is safe. So we try to make sure that even though I only have a contractual relationship with the client that hired us, I still consider the public that reads the document to be a party to that conversation, and that I have to serve them just as much.
Yeah, I agree with the standards, because it's a very different world when we're talking about like, hey, let's take one of the larger hacks that we've seen, recently, which was 23andMe. I think this is actually a really bad one. It exposed a lot of pertinent data about number of people. I was most likely exposed as well as my kids. I did 23andMe. You expect them to kind of keep that data safe. Seeing a bunch of things popping up. Around LifeLock and others that are, showcasing that some of my data is out there. Not a fun deal. But at the end of the day, like, I can mitigate it. I can manage it. There's nothing there. When you have a smart contract, that is assets, has value, has currencies and others in there that gets hacked and drained, like, there is no recovery. There is no safeguarding. There is monetary damage that is unrecoverable at that point. And so I do agree that in this new world of Web3 and blockchain tokenization of assets and identities and everything else, it has to be a slightly different standard, and it needs to be very scary.
Yeah, about the DNA privacy thing, I find this topic so fascinating because with AI right now, everybody has their P-doom, their probability of AGI taking over the planet. I'm not on that bandwagon. That is not my belief. But I think about the P of the end of DNA privacy, where the likelihood in the next 5 years that one of the major DNA companies gets hacked and has all of their core data leaked on the internet is pretty high. I'd say it's probably about 100%.
Yeah.
And once that happens, it's not going to be everybody's DNA, but it's going to be enough that you can determine familial relationships, and that's it. Like once that's out there, you can't go back.
Yeah.
So I take all the tests. I'm in every DNA database because I don't care. I've like already mentally prepared myself for this future, and I feel like the correct option to mitigate this outcome is to make laws about abuse of the DNA that will eventually become public, rather than even try and technically secure it. Like we're already past the point where it's a protectable asset.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic, and it just going back to the kind of the security around it. As you said, like it's going to get out there, it's going to happen. Like, and I accepted that as well. When I took the test, I knew what I was doing because I felt the benefits outweighed the risks. And still today, even with the latest hack, I'm like, okay, fine.
Right. Well, the benefits are like, if I lose some data and I get hacked and I have to deal with some sort of fraud or whatever. But on the other hand, if I do 23andMe and I find some condition that extends my life by even a week,
yeah.
Right? Like I would trade getting hacked for living an extra week on Earth.
Yeah,
absolutely. This is a great trade-off.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I have definitely found health benefits from that aspect. But the difference is that like when that hack occurred, I didn't go log into my bank account and go, oh, I'm broke now.
Right.
Hey, I no longer own my home because the title just got yanked out from underneath me, and now someone else is trying to evict me out of my own home because there was an insecure document. So I really do believe that there is a difference between Web 2 and the data that we're managing there, which is absolutely should be secured and could be secured if people really worked hard enough at it, versus Web 3, which is we're going to dive right into it now with Ledger, that it's a different standard. It just has to be, and let's be clear, there's very few people in Web 3 that are as concerned about security in my book as they should be, especially running some large protocols.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people that aren't. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know how to take it seriously. I think that's a big problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The end effect is that there's just a lot of people slinging a lot of code, and I don't really know how it all comes together, but it does somehow. It's a scary world out there.
Yeah, unregulated markets. But anyway, let's jump into the first one, which I think is very relevant, which is Ledger. I personally have promoted Ledger. In the past, I have used their devices. I have got a couple of them around here. We've done training classes for yWhales members and other people in the community on how to use Ledger. We did believe that they had a really good product. There's a lot of other things out there, but it seemed like Ledger understood security. They understood, being able to mitigate it. And then something changed last year, and that was that they suddenly included this new app store. They had the ability to kind of have the recovery ability that they were touting that like, hey, people are losing their seed keys. We want to be able to, you run an update and then you'll be able to call us. We'll be able to get you into these things. And there was a dynamic difference from a, kind of an air-gapped device that, after the first initialization of it, never really should go back on the internet. Or connect to it again. It's just, this should exist. It's a better device. And through now their decision to kind of make this more of a cloud device than an air gap device, there's a hack. The hack, very, very briefly, we got it first from Sushi's CTO, warns of an industry-wide exploit linked to Ledger's Connect kits. The compromised version prompts users to connect their wallets via pop-up, triggering a token drainer. So essentially what this is that there's an app store now in the new version of Ledger, and you can download, various apps to connect yourself with different dApps. So, hey, I want to connect with Ethereum. I want to have Solana. You want to have various chains. You want to have various updates. And so now there's this ability to kind of update and upgrade your device instead of having to buy a new one over and over and again, which is not a bad concept. However, what happens when you open up, one door for yourself is that now there's a door. Dan, obviously, I'm sure this has come across your radar. What's your thoughts and was this avoidable?
Yeah, absolutely. So TrailBits has done audits of, I believe the last count was 21 different Bitcoin or blockchain wallets in the past. Starting with the OG, we looked at the Parity wallet right after they were hacked back in like 2018. With these devices like Ledger, they were never just a piece of secure hardware. They always had to connect to a computer at some point, and that computer is running software that could be manipulated somehow. A lot of times the mental model that people were thinking about was, well, what happens if there's malware on the machine? People's laptops get malware on them all the time, and they can change the way that you interact with that hardware wallet and completely avoid all the security protections that it's supposed to be able to provide. So that's always been the case. Honestly, I'm a bit shocked here. So this is a different issue, right? Like in this case, that software, instead of there being malware on your machine, that software itself has dependencies that it updates when you double click on it, when you run it, and they're resolved dynamically. They're pulled from the internet and loaded into the software in order to perform some sort of function. For something like a wallet, that's insane. You should absolutely not be resolving dependencies at runtime that aren't even pinned and thinking that you've got a trustworthy application through which to access your hardware wallet. So I think a lot of companies in the blockchain space, they really have like this myopic vision about what security is. They focus in on one particular thing. So the firmware on the Ledger chip is like pretty robust at this point. It's hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard to get data back out the other end. But then you miss the fact that there's all this other software and a whole ecosystem that's required to interact with it. So yeah, it's just totally bonkers decision for how to build this application.
It's interesting because again, Web3 is supposed to be the more secure version. There's all this cryptography and buzzwords that people use, but we've now put the idea of self-custody into people's hands. And, while I think it's a right that everyone should have to have self-custody, just as you can go to a bank and withdraw cash, I don't think it's a great idea. I have quite simply changed my views on this by, knowing so many people that were just, dedicated air-gapped laptops, dedicated, wallets and everything else, and going through every step that they possibly could, never once tweeting about that they're a Bitcoin owner or even letting anyone know, other than, a few close friends and family. And they're still getting hacked. They're still just like looking in their wallet going, where did it go? How did it get drained? How did I get exposed? And so, this is one of those things that, having that wallet attached to it versus just a paper seed key, like, this was supposed to be one of the true cures, and now it's poisoned.
Yeah, I don't really ever, for most people, I really recommend going to a centralized exchange. They're going to have a security team that operates 24/7 and that thinks every moment of the day how to secure the wallet that they are storing for you. And that's not something you get when you put it on, put it under your mattress, right?
Yeah.
There is no security team. You are the security team. Are you capable of performing that task? I don't know. And a lot of this comes down to, you have to actually understand how all the software works and the whole stack that you're working with, because again, the Ledger device could be safe. It could have all these certifications and whatnot, but if you're accessing it through an app on your Mac, and that app is written insecurely in a way that's not perceptible visually, how are you going to know? It's frustrating.
Yeah, Dave, you were managing billions of dollars a year of Bitcoin and other assets. Did you just have a single ledger, or what was your security team like?
Yeah, I guess a couple of answers to that question is, hindsight's always 2020, right? When I take a step back and kind of look at what Ledger did here, there's two key value propositions to a wallet. It is security, number one, absolutely the biggest one, probably 80%, and then it's usability. And those two things are always at odds. They're always at the other ends of the spectrum, and you need to make choices and trade-offs. I think clearly here they made the trade-off in the wrong direction. The biggest concern that we always hear on the Ledger wallets for people that want to do self-custody is it's hard to use. It's impossible for me to make it work for my dad, for my mom. They need to go to centralized exchange, and then you have different types of problems. It's interesting to see some of the people working on this problem specifically. So I was at the Ocean launch about 2 weeks ago with Jack Dorsey of Block, and formerly Square, and they're coming out with a wallet. I haven't actually seen it yet, but I know they just announced it for these exact reasons. But they're going to have to make these types of similar trade-offs too. I think to your question directly, like there's other services we would use systems like Fireblocks that would securely centralize deal with this, do with the liquidation, all those kind of components without having a single key and a single person. Because at an institutional level, there's a lot of challenges of one owner and one problem. And we've seen that with the issues of, a laptop going missing, someone loses their keys and they're gone forever. And so these are, the real problems are things that are being worked on, but they're going to continue to be a dynamic. I think to Dan's point too, like security isn't something you do once. It's got to be architected at the beginning. And if it's not, and if it's not progressively followed on, these are the kind of problems that you see. And, fortunately, Bitcoin was created from the ground up to be secure, but some of the other ecosystems in and around it, I would say we're not. And it gets back to a lot of the usability concerns that we continue to see, plague the industry.
I think what's really interesting, and we're going to kind of bridge into the next article here in a second, is that Ledger was a startup. They're a new company that was born in the blockchain, and this is what they do, and this is where they're going to go, and clearly they got a little ahead of their skis, and started to want it to be more than just a cold storage or a security device. They wanted an app store. They had all these kind of dreams of grandeur. Now we're seeing IBM. Let's go back to the international business machines. Is introducing the HyperProtect offline signing orchestrator. So it's a new cold storage tech for crypto assets, cryptography signing technology designed for secure handling of digital assets in cold storage. OSO aims to reduce risks associated with manual procedures and enhance security for high-value transactions by incorporating features like disconnected network operations, real-time based security, multi-stakeholder electronic transaction approval. Ripple just bought a company called Medico, and they are a long-standing partner with IBM in the crypto space, and they will be one of the first users of this OSO design. Jumping back, right over to you, Dan. I listen. I applaud anyone that wants to get into the blockchain space and wants to enhance our ecosystem. When I was just at Money 2020, there was almost no booths that did not have some sort of blockchain integration with them. So we're clearly seeing fintech and TradFi, adopting blockchain technologies. What's your feeling about IBM entering the fray?
Well, IBM has been kind of one of the original gangsters here. They were working on Hyperledger a long time ago, and really had put that forward as a solution. But then, the market didn't really take to that, and they had to switch gears. So they have some competence in this area. They still employ thousands of research scientists that are all quite competent, especially in the AI field as well. So their ability to turn around a product like this seems pretty good, and it solves a problem that people have, right? Like the advice that a lot of people like myself would give to companies using blockchain technology would be that if you have keys, you should probably put them in an HSM. And HSMs are extraordinarily obtuse to work with. They are, the user experience is extremely poor. There's lots of manual steps involved, and it breaks the workflow of whatever kind of application you're trying to build. So if there's an opportunity to improve that, I think a lot of people would take a look. And right now, I do see a lot of activity from other funded startups that are trying to fix this sort of basic like cryptographic operations problem that people have with blockchain technology. Bastion is another good one that's also solving in the similar space. So I expect that this is likely going to be competitive in the next couple months and years with new solutions coming out.
When you say competitive, and I was just at the Firebox conference, last week, and really, like, it's amazing to see, when you see hundreds. There was over 750 people from around the world, focused on just wallets, wallets, integration of wallets, integration with custody, all the kind of talks that you want to have. But there was no one talking about affordability. Fireblock's cheapest plan is like $70,000 a year. And it's great. It's fabulous. I mean, I think they've built in some great protocols, but that's not something that the average person, that wants to buy a couple $100 worth of cryptocurrencies is going to be able to have access to. Do you feel that we're going to, and that was the way email and a lot of other things started out way back in the day in Web 1. It was business operations, and then it worked its way into consumers. We kind of have a reverse cycle here right now where it's everything's starting with retail and consumers, and now it's working its way back up to institutions. Do you feel like we're going to see an affordable enterprise grade custody solution anytime soon?
Yeah. So in the security industry, we call this the security poverty line. It's the area where you have to pay enough in order to like board the ride, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of opportunities above that $70,000 mark or whatever it costs for Fireblocks, but below it, it's a very underserved market because you can't make a market out of it. You can't actually address it well enough to make back the cost of your product development. The blockchain world has kind of put that in a different sort of balance, right? Because you're dealing with a direct representation of some kind of value. So a lot of people have a lot more money and a lot more immediate negative effects if they don't secure it well. So the security poverty line is actually a lot lower. But still, I haven't seen a lot of development of like security conscious and security forward wallet software and mini HSMs, things like using you can buy a YubiKey HSM. YubiKeys are the security keys that you can put in your USB slot. They let you log into Google, to Dropbox, to like all these other things. They're great. You should totally use them. Every single laptop at TrailBits has a YubiKey in it. And YubiKey makes a special version that's an HSM, which means that you can load key material into it, and then you can have it perform trusted cryptographic actions. So you could use that to like store all the keys to interact with your smart contract, and that is fundamentally better than leaving it present on your computer somewhere or in a server somewhere. But that's sort of a DIY thing. There's not a lot of software to help manage that process. And there don't seem to be a lot of service providers that could assist with it. So even though the raw material is there, the person to glue it all together hasn't materialized.
Interesting. Dave, again, this is you've spent so many years, managing, you never managed funds, but you had to kind of facilitate this going back and forth. You've seen good solutions, bad solutions. I'm sure you've gotten some of those calls going like, hey, where did I lost funds? Things happen. Are most people as concerned with custody and the security around custody as they should be? And you were dealing with institutional people that were, in your latest foray. Do you feel that it's top of the mind when we're talking about mining or really the creation of these things?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I guess I'll first start out. I think anytime that a brand like IBM is getting into this space is good for the overall industry. I would have loved to have been present when they came up with that brand name, like the whiteboarding session, because I can't imagine that was would have been my pick. But that aside, I think it's not a one size fits all type of idea, right? And I think there's kind of a history here of the not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Like that makes sense if you're a single user and you're looking to hold on to these keys forever, right? Or the actual assets themselves. In the case of like a lot of the miners, there's a lot of liquidation, there's movement, there's other financial concerns and ideas and things that they need to do, and it just really is a different solution set that they need. It might need to do daily liquidations. It might need to actually transfer a piece of it out from time to time and have different types of custodial controls. And some of those solutions, we talked about Fireblocks, and there's several out there that have been working to address that. I think Dan's point where that kind of that mid market, like less than when you're putting, tens of thousands or hundreds of $1,000s in there a month in some sort of movement is where there's not necessarily a solution for. And I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to be addressed in the meantime. And I think that's going to continue to be a gap just because there aren't economics that are going to necessarily make sense.
That's interesting. So pivoting a little bit to Dave, something you're a little bit more familiar with, and we'll put Dan a little bit on his heels here. So the European Central Bank recently examined the environmental impact of banknotes. Isn't it nice to see them caring about somebody else's energy consumption? They identified 16 impact categories. Banknotes have a smaller environmental footprint compared to crypto. However, energy efficiency remains. They targeted specifically, I think this is interesting, ATMs contribute to 37% of the carbon imprints of banknotes, with transportation of those banknotes at 35%. So close to or over 70% of the footprint of these things, the carbon offset, is just with the distribution of from transportation, or as well as is ATM usage. And again, it's hard to believe that ATMs are that prevalent as far as energy consumption, but I guess nobody's ever never worried about them because they're plugged in 24/7. But when we think about like the arguments that they make around cryptocurrencies, which are frictionless, generally I would say relatively low energy compared to anything else. Even Bitcoin, I think, is low energy compared to when you're talking about bank branches and entire buildings and people driving to work. If you kind of take into factor a lot more than just like one or two things, what was the manufacturing cost of those ATMs? I do think that Bitcoin's much lower. That being said, the crypto industry has been addressing this for a while, and I'd love to just hear your takes on an article like this, as well as what you've been seeing, in your career as a professional miner, that has been taken to kind of really mitigate and drop that significantly.
Yeah, what I always look at these, the mainstream media, you always got to take a step back. Who's writing it, and what's their purpose, and what's their intent? I can count on one hand how many of these I've seen that have been truly without any sort of form or function in terms of where they want to take the narrative, right? Where they're truly independent. It just rarely has existed. And, there was something in the Wall Street Journal just like a week ago about water usage in Bitcoin. And it had just a bunch of assumptions and things that simply didn't pencil out. I think, and I see this on the other side too, in some of the pro crypto. Like, they don't take everything into account either, and it's simply got a narrative that is really meant to fit the industry. I think what's really missing is that independent body to really step back, take a look at the environmental effects of what's really happening here. And we see this obviously even in things like EVs, like with battery chargers, with the amount of mining that needs to go into these types of things, the transmission that needs to get built out, the generation, like just all the things aren't being taken into account. And I just feel like they're all biased. And so this ECB one, I see a very similar context to what I've seen historically. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing right now because everybody has their view and their direction, and they're a bit shielded of where they want to take this.
Interesting.
I will say that a lot of these analyses of like blockchain networks globally tend to be pretty naive, to piggyback on some of what Dave was saying. We did a project like this for DARPA back about, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, where we studied whether blockchain networks are even decentralized at all. And that project necessitated almost a year of effort from a team of people writing custom software to analyze the Bitcoin and Ethereum blockchains, because the networks, even though the transactions are transparent, you can go investigate all of them purportedly. The mining software that's used, how those things communicate to each other, where they're located, and all the other factors involved in achieving consensus on the network are actually very opaque. There aren't tools to monitor it. There aren't tools to investigate it. And it kind of just comes together. And our analysis and the tools that we put online are some of the only tools that enable you to do that. So this sort of analysis, I would immediately give a little side eye to, because I'm not sure it was as rigorous as probably the work that we did.
Yeah, they never really are. And I think that's one of the points I want to bring up is there's a lot of work that's happening inside of our industry to address these types of things. We're seeing, I would say in my opinion, I think that crypto professional crypto miners for Bitcoin and for others are some of the largest investors in alternative energy and also developing, lower cost because it doesn't make any sense. When you're really talking about like energy is, there's a direct ROI on energy. You want to maximize your return on that energy usage. And Dave, you used to talk about this at length. You're always looking for, cheaper energy that was just getting, really disposed of in a variety of ways. Like you need not just cheap energy, but you need to maximize your ROI on that.
Yeah, I think exactly that point. I mean, miners are going to do what's in their economic best interest, right? They're economic animals at the end of the day. They're going to lowest cost. Lowest cost is normally driven by renewable or stranded. We see that play time and time again. I think there's been a lot of additions to the grid balancing and some of those things. And while they're true, fundamentally the economics are what drive this industry and continue to do so. It's fundamentally a commodity production market, and it's continuing to scale, it's continuing to grow, it's going to continue to mature. Lowest cost will win, and at a certain point, only lowest cost will survive. And so we're going to continue to see that evolution of high cost miners either get taken out of business or try to find ways to drive it down. I do see a future where there's much more vertical integration, i.e., and I wouldn't say just proof of work compute, but computing in general. The data center world is also going to go this way, where they're more vertically integrated and synergistic with these energy assets. Just because what we're seeing with generative AI, just the multitude of power and energy that's needed just to make it work is going to force that. And the transmission and some of the other technologies just aren't there to do it the way that the industry has been doing it for years. And so that's going to drive, I think, a lot of changes. But miners specifically, especially commodity production, are going to continue to drive towards the lowest costs, and that's going to continue to evolve.
You bring up a really good point. The AI, world hasn't even yet to be attacked by the environmentalists to the same capacity that the crypto industry has been attacked.
It has.
Is it good? Good. I just missed it.
Extremely effectively. There's a paper from a woman named Tinmit who got fired from Google for describing the effect of AI on climate change. It's a paper called Stochastic Parrots, and okay. That is one of the most widely referenced papers in the entire field of AI. It describes all the negative effects of AI quite succinctly in about 5 or 6 pages. Really good paper. I recommend reading it.
I will absolutely check that out. I mean, because one of the things I do know, I also am in commercial real estate, is that there is a mass hunt around the planet for new data centers. And right now it's actually hard to take any existing data infrastructure, because generally, these are built for, you want to have kind of the maximum power, everything else. And even for like Bitcoin and everything else, it's hard because it's like, when you're thinking about the ASICs, they're just like burning energy. I mean, they're doing as much as they can to produce as much, horsepower as they can. And now all of a sudden with AI and look, at the end of the day, if a Bitcoin node or a Bitcoin, data center, which happens all the time in Texas, goes down, the network stays up, everything's fine. You can turn them on, you can turn them off, you can migrate them, you can move them around, solar energy, it just shuts down at night. No big deal. You were earning a little less money. But, if ChatGPT was going down every time there's a storm, in Texas, or that every time that there's a power spike in California, if an entire Web2 website goes out, it doesn't work anymore. And so they're now really kind of going in and stealing, very, very intrusive on power. So I do agree. And I do know this, and I'm glad to hear that somebody is speaking up, because if we're going to be attacked for cryptocurrency mining, AI really is going to overtake that very quickly if they haven't already.
Yeah, it's coming. At a certain point, energy usage is neither good nor bad, right? It is what it is, and providing that, and we'll see technology evolve with that. I think to your point, Jay, I think 2 things about your comment is that there's both what I consider industry norms
Mhm.
and also technological progress that has been made that addresses some of those things. And you see this in real time today, like in Amazon. I mean, you have availability zones, things fail over, things change. That same technology, that same kind of comprehension can be built into the software layer for things like ChatGPT. And people need to think that all the redundancy doesn't need to be built in the physical layer. And that can drive both the cost down of compute and the availability to put these in places where we traditionally wouldn't. And that's, I think, going to be a big shift in the data center world. You know, commercial real estate side, it's just opening up opportunities that previously weren't there. It's going to be interesting to see if the miners can start to pivot some of the business model, because it's such a fundamentally different business, right? Mining is the only business I've ever been in where you don't need to go to market. You don't need sales. You don't need marketing. You literally plug a machine in and you have revenue generation, right? And AI, while there's some marketplaces, aren't necessarily all there. You still got to get forward in and be able to contract, have clients, et cetera, and be able to actually turn that up. And so I think that's going to be the biggest shift as we continue to see, you know, to your point, the big push for power at a global scale.
Well, I think we're also seeing this in a variety of ways. So in the commercial real estate world, you know, there's always been kind of metrics, you know, depending on, you know, is this industrial, is this retail, you know, everything else. And now there's a new metric that I'm starting to see, you know, in my kind of due diligence as I look through buildings, which is available power. Or distance to substations and others. And that's something that was never there a few years ago. And I can say from experience, you know, one of my properties that I sold a couple of years ago was selected specifically, not just because of the location, but because of access to power, and was ultimately purchased, you know, by Tesla. Because now all of a sudden there's, you know, like, I never needed that much power when I owned the building. You know, no one else would have ever needed that much power, but suddenly you have, you know, an electric car, you know, retailer that is going to be doing service and everything else. And they had to be able to charge these cars, you know, before delivery or after service. And they're now going back through and kind of you know, kind of updating some of their service centers. So I think power, which we've always known is kind of that crux thing that just existed, it's now becoming in short supply as, you know, we move to electric cars, we move to generative AI, we move to, you know, digital money. There is, I mean, people have warned for a while, there's going to be, you know, scarcity of power because of how we generate it.
Yeah, and if you multiply that, if everybody had an EV, and the amount of transmission, like it doesn't pencil,
Yeah.
Not even close, right? And so that's where I say it's fundamentally, like, again, it's who's writing the narrative. And if it's Tesla, it's like, hey, EVs are great for the world, they're great for the environment, they're not polluting.
Yeah.
You take a step back, you look at everything else that needs to happen amongst it. Is it really? And so again, more independence is needed, and I just wish the mainstream media, the Wall Street Journals, et cetera, of the world were much more tuned into that, because they're not.
That's not media. That's propaganda. Let's call it what it is.
So one of these things that I think people should know that might cause them to lose even more sleep after listening to this episode is so as our reliance on electricity grows over time, as the grid becomes electrified and all the objects, you know, I just replaced a washer and a dryer and they're both electric, right? That's the direction we're all going. These things become relevant to national security very quickly. Like if the power goes out, it's not an inconvenience, it's a life-threatening situation. And as we enter into more global conflicts, there are a lot of people out there that are using cyber power, that are using, like, you know, hacking into stuff in order to affect these sorts of resources. So there's a really big story in the Wall Street Journal and other mainstream media right now about how China has tasked teams within their military to gain access to all the critical infrastructure supporting our power network in the United States as a preparation for a future conflict. It's shockingly scary, since that's the sort of thing that you need to prepare ahead of time in order for it to work when you need it. And that's the future that China's preparing for. And it means that, you know, next time we do something where, you know, we enter into some kind of global conflict, they can turn off the lights and they can do it instantaneously, and they can do it in a location that's like far away from the coast. So yeah, there it is.
Yeah, and
to your point, like a lot of the critical infrastructure just simply isn't available. You try to get a large scale transformer, 150, 200, 300 MVA, I mean, 18, 24, 36 months type of build types of lead times.
Yeah.
And so
And that's just the raw manufacturing, right? And that
they're
doesn't
not,
even describe the computers that come to manage that equipment. Where historically, if you're purchasing stuff to power a power station, it's not going to be running like the latest and greatest version of whatever operating system that is out there. It's probably going to be some stuff that's maintained for like 20 years.
yeah,
So
China's
all
scary.
this stuff
Throw
is,
the guy with a 50 caliber gun, right? Like,
yeah,
or some kind of just silly bomb that can throw it over. And it's just pissed off. Like, all those kind of things could affect us in the same kind of manner you're talking about. So, were you in New York when you had the power outage? What was it, 3 years ago?
I was, yeah. I've been in a couple of big power outages in New York. I remember when I was in high school, there was one that lasted for like 4 or 5 days. It was August. I can't remember. It was fun. Back then it was fun.
Because you're out of school.
Yeah. Yeah. In 2023, it's definitely not fun.
Interesting. Interesting. So let's move over to a couple quick reg tech talks. Everyone's favorite topic, real quick, because I think this is relevant. Is a number of the things we're talking about. We're no longer as much of geographically limited when we're talking about cryptocurrencies and everything else. It really is a global phenomenon. And the reason why some technologies work so well, like email, is there are just international standards. ICANN kind of controls a variety of things. There's a number of others, for DNS control and why domain names work. We've kind of said like, here's the rules of the internet. And then there's obviously, geographical, tweaks and differences. But email flows and works very well because it doesn't matter what your tech stack is, doesn't matter what your domain name is. It just flows, and it's very inclusive. Whether you've got a multi-million-dollar enterprise grade server, or you just have a free Gmail account, like anyone can send and receive email. You may get some spam, but whatever the case is. So right now there's just vastly different, opinions on how to manage digital assets, tokenization, cryptocurrencies, and everything else. So on one hand, in the United States, which I think is entirely taking the wrong approach on this, plus so many others, we have Senator Warren has come out with a number of other senators and proposed the Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act. Sounds great. Sounds like, of course, I would want to support that. I don't want anybody, laundering money. I don't want them to be using these things, but aims to combat illicit use of crypto for money laundering and terrorism financing. I could read more of this, but at this point, it's been debunked so many times that this is a non-issue. She continually refers to as the same study from about 2-3 years ago that was incorrectly, kind of calculated, and more than that, it's does it occur? Of course. What's the scale of it? It is, fractional, a fraction of a single percent compared to the amount of money laundering that occurs within the traditional financial ecosystem, or just using U.S. cash banknotes as well. The positive note on Ms. Warren here is, while she is a very vehement anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto, and anti-digital money person, out of the 300 bills that she's proposed over the last 3 years, she is at a 0% hit rate. So a lot of smoke, a lot of steam, a lot of threats. It does influence things, but nothing ever goes through. That being said, is there any validity to things that we should be concerned about, as Americans, or from this juncture about the things that she's saying? I'll start with you, Dan.
Yeah, so I disagree with a little bit of your take there. I do
Good.
think this is a problem.
Okay.
North Korea in particular is stealing billions of dollars of cryptocurrency and using it to directly fund their nuclear ambitions, right? Like that is the story that people in DC are hearing, and that is backed up by facts. And it's a really serious new fundamental capability, right? Like there's tons of fraud that happens on traditional banking, or not fraud, tons of money laundering that happens on traditional banking, but we kind of have a handle on that. Like we know where it happens, we can monitor it. There's like procedures around it. You can tighten the screws, loosen them up, whatever. There's controls. Whereas this is a fundamental new capability. Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else expose sort of brand new tools that a lot of people that are trying to hide these money flows or trying to do them too quickly for people to notice are able to abuse in a completely uncontrolled environment and left unaddressed, left unaddressed, this could become a much, much larger problem. It's not just North Korea. Russia makes very extensive use of cryptocurrency to do things like avoid sanctions. They also have a record of their intelligence agencies using cryptocurrency in order to do things including pay off informants, as well as the shadow brokers campaign, where they solicited donations from the public in order to release classified information from the National Security Agency. Like, there's a lot of abuse that's being facilitated by cryptocurrency, and I think it only makes sense that people in Congress are thinking about, well, what should we do to make this less of an issue going forward? A lot of people overreact to that, and they create these very unsophisticated knee-jerk responses. That's true. But certainly, I think this rises to the level where Congress should probably have a look at it.
I love what you said real quick, and I want to respond. I do believe that every transaction on blockchain should be KYC, AML, OFAC compliant, GDPR, the entire thing. So I do not believe in being anonymous for financial transactions, and that is certainly the safeguard. But as far as your other things, that's new information to hear about North Korea for me. Dave.
I think we can't be on one side saying that these technologies are revolutionary and they open up new opportunities for the world of finance, and then also saying that, well, money laundering is not an issue and we totally shouldn't worry about it, or like it doesn't exist. The whole thing is brand new, and it is exciting, and it offers a lot of new capabilities, and it offers a lot of new capabilities for money laundering too. And people have seized on that.
Yeah. No, Dave, you jump in before I keep going.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, Dan brings up some good points, but I'll just say I think it's a balance. I think I think the U.S. has now weaponized the U.S. dollar to such an extent that I think the reserve currency status on a long-term basis is at risk. And I think that's very clear. If you ever read like Treasury's War, like the things that have happened in the last 15 years is unbelievable. And I don't fundamentally blame Russia for trying to get off it, not just for the nefarious things, but just for the power that the U.S. can exert. And I think China has an exact similar view, as would anyone else that's kind of a coming world power. Now, while at the end of the day, some bad things can and will happen, I think the issue that I see in DC is a fundamental misunderstanding of how blockchain, how crypto, how digital assets work relative to the traditional financial system. And that's where I believe a lot of the prescribed solutions simply don't work, or just simply force it offshore. This doesn't go away. They're not going to be able to wish it away, and that fundamentally even might give it more, fuel to the fire to increase adoption. And so I think there needs to be a much more nuanced, balanced act where it's an educated policy, and that's not what I'm seeing right now come out of Warren. I'm seeing, to your point, Jay, screaming, yelling, this is effed up and we're going to fix it. But then when you start to look at the solve, it doesn't technically or practically work.
Yeah. Well, and let me say why, let me kind of clarify one of the things why I don't like Warren's approach. I don't like a number of what the SEC is doing, which is legislating through lawsuits. I very much differently agree with the EU's approach, which is my car. Which is very quickly rolling out, and we'll be continually updating the markets and crypto asset regulations. So FinRamp, one of the companies we're launching, we're bypassing the United States at this time because there is no regulatory clarity. So if you want United States citizens not to touch these things, that's the government's choice. But we're seeing Europe going, no, this is a new asset class. We want to do things like eliminate money laundering. So everything's got to be KYC, AML, GDPR, and they're being very clear that there are regulations around these things to manage and mitigate, same as under MiFID II, money laundering and terrorism funding. And we're seeing people respond. We're seeing companies like myself, launching in the EU. Robinhood right now is just announcing they're entering the EU crypto market, embracing regulatory clarity. And I think that maybe have been a little bit of the miss that I had in this, Dan, is that I'm not saying that she's entirely false. I'm saying that, a lot of times it's just the shaking of the banter and being, hey, this is just an evil thing used for nothing but. There is no valid use for cryptocurrencies except for terrorism and money laundering. is generally where I like to completely disagree with her. That being said, I much more agree with the approach of like, provide the rules of the guidelines of how you want to do it, and allow the companies and capitalism to kind of run the world versus just banning. Dave, what's your thoughts?
You say Dan or Dave? Sorry,
Dave. Let's say to you first, and then we'll come back to Dan.
So
Yeah, are you familiar? Are you
I
familiar
think
with
it's
my car at all?
Sorry, what?
Are you familiar with Mica or my car in the EU at all?
I'm not. No.
Okay.
I've done none in the EU, so I'm not. But I guess it doesn't really change my view that I think to your point, you need the regulatory framework, you need clarity. A lack of clarity affects innovation. We see that today in and amongst the system itself. And again, I think the worst thing the U.S. can do from a regulatory and government standpoint is push it offshore entirely, where they have no say in the future.
Interesting. Dan, what's your opinion on again? There's a big difference between the U.S. Regulating through lawsuits versus the EU, regulating through being transparent and trying to work with companies to create rules and guidelines.
Yeah, this is a little bit outside my area of expertise. Like I'm pretending to be a regulator right now in the U.S. Because a lot of the lack of clarity from any area that Congress or that the executive branch agencies are regulating comes from the lack of interaction they have with technical experts. Um, so I've been volunteering my time over at the CFTC to help them wrap their heads around various kinds of emerging technology, whether it's AI, blockchain, or just cybersecurity in general. And I think it's just an important thing that people participate in these institutions that are supposed to be here to, at the end of the day, help us. Um, if I'm a doer, right? Like if I'm not happy with something, I get off my butt and I go walk myself down to the thing I'm unhappy about and try and fix it. So, I think obviously a lot of people need to think about what kind of expertise they can offer, and find opportunities to provide it for
And
better
Dan,
outcomes.
I want to kind of extrapolate on that for a second, because that is absolutely one of the most amazing things about you and what you've been doing. You've been educating, Congress. You've been educating, as many people as you possibly can on the realities of these things, which is why we love having you on Fireside and on the podcast, because at the end of the day, you are integral, much more integral than I think most people understand, into kind of Web3's success or struggles, which is making sure that it is secure, making sure that institutions understand what who they're doing business with and partnering with. Where do you see the biggest lack of education? Really, whether it's United States or global, that we really should be focusing more on.
Um, so I mean, my my thing is security, right? So the area that I see the greatest sort of disparity is in that particular subfield of all technology, right? Security is a field that you're either a novice that really doesn't know a whole lot about anything, or you're an expert that knows all of it. And there really aren't a lot of people that are in between. Um, so the number of people that are experts is also very low, and they can't satisfy the need of society at large right now. So what you have is a lot of people that are running around just very uninformed about risks that they've experienced, that they're currently in, or what to do about them, and that causes a lot of bad outcomes. It's especially prevalent for the blockchain industry, as we have beaten to death in the first half of this talk. Um, but it's just as prevalent inside Congress, even though they're like situated directly next door to the National Security Agency, the CIA, the FBI, whatever. Um, there's still just not enough expertise to go around. Um, yeah, that's sort of a problem.
Yeah.
And I don't really know of a whole lot of things that people are doing to fix that. There's some nice like Coursera courses that are online, and I think what a lot of people are doing is, from a software as a service standpoint, a lot of companies have taken a more paternalistic view on how they should provide security for their users. That they want to remove choice from the operation of their product and provide security as default, or even as something you can't turn off. so that you have to think about less before you make some kind of action with the product. And in general, that's a pretty good solution, but it doesn't fix the root cause problem, which is just that people don't understand how technology works, and what they're about to do could hurt them.
And hence now we've introduced magical internet money.
Yeah, that was great. Absolutely much less complex than the software you use every day.
That's fabulous. So, gentlemen, I really appreciate the time today. It's been absolutely fabulous. As we kind of draw, right now towards a close, I think we've covered a lot of topics. We've introduced a lot of fear into everyone. At this point, if you've not kind of dug into your drawer, looking for your ledger and trying to think of, what is my solution to deal with this, I would say, I do trust, Coinbase, that they're going to be in existence for a few more minutes. So maybe a temporary solution to move to a large exchange, maybe Coinbase or Kraken. I'm not going to name Binance at this time because they got their own issues. But there's security clearly is something that if you are going to be in this ecosystem of holding digital assets yourself, or even having someone else hold it, it needs to be consistently evaluated approach right now, because there is no long-term, like, hey, I've been, with US Bank for 3 decades and everything's always been fine. Like this is new emerging fields, and we need to kind of really take that approach. As we kind of round the horn here, any final thoughts, Dave, and where can people find you?
So, final thoughts. The world is good. Things are still moving forward. There's some scary things along the way, but like anything, life has risk every day waking up, right? And I think the good news is we got good guys like Dan and other folks and professionals working to solve these problems each and every day. And I just remember the days of the 90s, the early days of the internet. Like, so many problems, so many challenges, hard to use, ton of security issues. Got fixed, right, and continue to evolve and continue to move forward. We're seeing the same evolution in this industry. It's just it's the same and it's different all at the same time. So I think there's a lot of fun. So you can reach me on my LinkedIn, Dave Perrill, Perrill, and happy to sync up with any further questions down the road. So Jay, thanks for having me.
Fabulous. Dan, you powered through. You weren't feeling so great this morning. I hope you feel better the rest of the day. But final thoughts and where can people hunt you down?
Yeah, just to piggyback on one thing you said, the exchanges that usually come up at the top of the list for me are Coinbase, Kraken, and Gemini. They all have security teams that are reputable, and Kraken and Gemini I've worked with personally through Trail of Bits. So I could I'm not going to say that they're safe, but I am going to say that they invest a little bit more into their security than other firms I know about. Final thoughts are like, when you use technology like this, you got to try and keep it simple. The minute that you overextend yourself and start using a whole bunch of technology that you don't fully understand, is the time when you're going to get surprised and with a punch in the face, right? So really just make sure that you're using the lowest amount of technology required in order to get the job done. I'm sort of hopeful for the future of this technology. Like right now, I think a lot of people have gotten a religion of software security techniques like invariant testing that make DeFi applications substantially more secure. And it took a couple of years. Like, we were saying this sort of thing back in like 2017, 2018. It took a couple of years for the knowledge to get memed out there and adopted by everyone else. But today that outlook is pretty good. People ask us to write security tests and to define security properties for their code, and then evaluate against that sort of rigorous standard to ensure the outcomes are actually dependable. So that gives me some hope. But it's still, there's still going to be a security poverty line. There's going to be firms out there that don't have the money, that don't have the expertise, that don't have the capability, that don't have the influence, that don't have something that allows them to be secure. And that is going to constantly churn, where every week there's going to be a new hack. And it's going to be because those people didn't have any of those characteristics to allow them to get above the poverty line and be safe.
Final question. Does AI help any of this?
Not really.
You just killed like 1,000 startups right there.
Sorry. I think there's some really neat opportunities. So people in the math field have created a new tool called Lean Dojo, which uses AI to help as a proof assistant, a mathematical proof assistant, where it helps you walk through all the intermediate steps required to get to a fully working mathematical proof. It's a really cool system. It works. The mathematical work that mathematicians do is now very accelerated based on using Lean Dojo. I think there's opportunities for application of that to security testing inside of blockchain software, where you could extract out what the key security property. So here's just for anybody. Here's what a security property is. If I have a wallet and I give $10 to Jay, then that means that my wallet goes down by $10 and Jay's wallet goes up by $10. That's it. That's a security property. If that is ever broken, if something else happens that's not that, then I have a security vulnerability. If I give Jay $10 and we both end up with $10 more, that's a problem. So defining these security properties is the key task required to build safe software. You have to have a comprehensive list of all the properties, and then you need to have software that tests all the properties. So an AI assistant that helps you define what those properties should be, as well as helps you write the tests for them, would be very useful. And it's something that we're working on right now. But that's sort of like that's a minor addition, right? Like security's not just that. We published something called the REC test, which are 12 yes or no questions that help you understand the maturity of your entire security program. Because even if you write safe software, you need to have a process in place to deal with it when somebody hacks it. You need to have incident response, disaster recovery. You probably need to have identified roles within the company that deal with these sorts of risks and that can manage them and coordinate them. There's a variety of other things required to ship a secure product. So AI doesn't solve a lot of those. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a really nice accelerator. It'll give us 10 or 20% more output based on judicious use of it, but it's not going to fundamentally change a whole lot in the short term.
Fabulous. Gentlemen, thank you so much. yWhales, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again.
Yep. Thanks a lot for having me.